Alright, my Tales history. Before I begin this little tale, I just want to be upfront about a couple things. First of all, be prepared to call me a hipster or an old man or whatever the hell it is you kids nowadays call people who are like, I was here way before all of you were, you know. I came to the Tales series pretty early, which I kind of have started to think is a reason I don't really connect to the Tales fan base very much in general. But, hey, you know, I still came in later than those who started with the original Fantasia, so points to them. Second, if you consider yourself a part of the fan base of Symphonia or Vesperia, or even the Dejab translation of Fantasia, I apologize in advance. You should probably turn the video off. I haven't had good experiences with these fan bases, so I'm probably gonna sound pretty negative when I eventually get to that part of the tale. So yeah, in advance, sorry if you decide to stick around. Alright, so last, there's a little tidbit that you should also know. I brought this up in other videos on the podcast and other stuff that's been Tales related, so, you know, but I'll make this brief. When I was a kid, my parents weren't around all that often because they were working all the time, so I was basically raised by my cousins. They actually are basically the people who introduced me to video games. It was something we really liked to do when we had nothing else to do at the time. We would play games like Mario Kart, Mega Man, anything by Capcom, Sonic, you name it, whatever. We would share a lot of games, especially since, you know, our parents didn't have much money, so, you know, whatever we could get, we would share. So, that said, two of those games, which, you know, got me into the Tales series as a whole, are Tales of Destiny and Tales of Eternia. Back in 2000, whatever, I think it was like 2002, something like that, when I was around 9 years old, one of my cousins and I, we were walking around Blockbuster, yeah, I remember those, and we saw a game that, you know, we were looking at the cover and we were like, oh, this looks interesting. We didn't know anything about it. It was Tales of Destiny. Sure enough, we were both fans of RPGs, so we liked it. He liked playing as Stan, and when we eventually figured out how the multiplayer worked in that game, I liked playing as Gar. So, yeah, we liked it a lot. We were impressed by how, it was one of the few RPGs we played where your characters actually got to move around and, you know, like, do combos, what little of them there were back in those days. You know, stuff like that. You know, we liked how actiony it was. So, now, that then led into something else, because after we finished that, we were like, oh, is there any more to this game? Oh, dude, it would be cool if there was a sequel. Well, sure enough, we later saw Tales of Eternia, or, as it would later on be called, or rather, back then it was called, Tales of Destiny 2. Yeah, you can imagine the confusion, because we didn't really have access to much of the internet back then, so we didn't really have a strict clarification. But hey, whatever, we didn't care. Upon playing it, we just kind of figured it was like Final Fantasy, you know, being numbered but not really having much to do with one another. So, yeah, we played it, we figured out you could do multiplayer from the get-go instead of having to wait for items like in Destiny. And, you know, we actually really liked this game. We fell in love with the colorful characters, the fast-paced battle system, the music was always something nice that we enjoyed. We were impressed by the voice acting, because back then there weren't many games that, or at least that we owned, that were voice acted. So we were like, oh, they're talking to us, that's awesome, you know, so especially for an RPG, that was really cool. So, you know, we shared a lot of memories over this game. This led to things such as us hating on Farah, and for anyone who's a fan of Farah, note that the main reason we didn't like Farah was because her AI was horrible. Now, I know that's not saying much for Tales AI, but like, oh god, it was especially bad on Farah. We would have the worst luck with her. We kicked her out of the party as soon as we possibly could. So, and then there were other things we did. Like, we would fight over who got to play as Reed, because he was our favorite both of our favorite. And then there was also the mini-games that, to this day, we still think are complete bullshit. Like, oh my god, the AI cheats so hard. Especially during the freaking Cramel Ball, the Volleyball X minigame. Anyway. We had a lot of fun with this game. We played it from start to finish together. Really loved it. And, such feelings have stayed with me over the years. Eternia is still one of my favorite RPGs in general, and still my favorite Tales game. So, I mentioned earlier that, not much access to internet back then. Well, it's because of that we were never aware of later games coming out. Now, granted, there were always a few years gaps for America, but still. And, it wasn't helped by whenever we would go browsing rental stores and stuff, we would still never see we would never see, like, a Tales of Destiny 3 or anything like that, so we just kind of figured, oh, they did 2 and they stopped, that sucks. So, later on in my life, though, I would eventually have a computer with internet, and as such, I would get my first taste of the Tales community, because I looked up a bunch of games I like, including Destiny 2, as it was called. So what was my first exposure to the community as a whole? Well, it was GameFAQs. Yeah, I know. You don't gotta say it. GameFAQs has this terrible reputation, and you know what? I don't blame you. It sucks. But back then, it was really the only general Tales place. Hell, it was the only general video game place I could find at the time, really. I mean, granted, there were a few others, but, like, they were all dead, pretty much. So, whatever. It worked for me. And I found it cool that each game had its own little section, so you could talk specifically about it. And at GameFAQs, I also managed to find people who actually, there weren't many, but they shared my love for Destiny and Eternia, as GameFAQs would correct me on. And I was like, oh, weird, why'd they rename it? Whatever, so... we had a lot of fun discussing characters, setups. People would give me a bunch of gameplay tips, because I'd be like, how do you do this? Or, oh god, I can't do this, or, so, yeah, it was friendly, at least in my experience. And also, forum games used to be rampant at the time, so there was a lot of fun to be had. It's also the site that made me aware of what was at the time I knew was the third entry of the Tales series, Tales of Symphonia! Now, you might be thinking I'm going about how Symphonia is like the greatest game ever. Well, sorry to say, it's not gonna happen. See, Symphonia's always been a complete mystery to me in terms of it and people's reaction to it. Now, when I saw there were more Tales games, I was excited. I didn't know shit about emulation, so I couldn't go and emulate the other games until much later in my life, because that stuff was like gibberish to me. But, so I was like, well, Symphonia's in English, and it's on the GameCube. Cool, I should go get it. So, after seeing, especially since, I had seen how people were praising it, they were like, oh, this is one of the greatest RPGs ever. Yeah, whatever. So, went out, found myself a copy, popped it in my GameCube, played it. I hate it. Sorry to say, I hate this fucking game. I couldn't believe it was in the same series as the other Tales games, to be honest with you, because, despite a similar battle system, it was just so off-putting to me. Everyone was acting like it was the new FF7. I didn't see it, and I still don't see it, really. Like, to me, it just came off as like a really bad or at least the first half game came off as like a really bad rip-off of Final Fantasy X, in my opinion, anyway. So, to rub salt in all of this, Symphonia, I began to notice, had a huge number of fan websites, whereas Destiny and Eternia had like none. You would have to go to like a general site to even just talk about them, or at least I couldn't find them. So I was like, I don't get it. Why is everyone saying this game is so great? Because it's, especially compared to other RPGs, like, it's got nothing that does anything for me. So me, being as stupid as I was back then, I decided to go on one of these fan sites, and I don't remember the name, but it's been way too fucking long. I'm sorry. But anyway, I asked a very simple question there. Basically my post was, I don't get why everyone says this game is so great. Can someone please explain it to me? I don't get it. To me, it's nothing special. As you might expect, they all ripped my head off. So that made me upset, and I said, fine, I'll just work like GameFAQs or this site or other sites and just try to decipher just what is it about this game that is so special. This only ended up making me hate the fanbase even more, though, because as far as I could tell, or at least as far as I could tell, people loved Symphonia so much solely because it was like their first Tales game, or in some cases even their first RPG. And if you think this is exclusive to Symphonia, no, like, there were other games that I noticed this about too, like Skies of Arcadia, which, if you want it, for the record, my reaction to that was, it's okay, but everywhere I look, people are praising the shit out of it. Whatever. So, yeah, and, to make it all worse, I saw a lot of posts where people would actively refuse to, like, not only not to search out other Tales games, but even, like, to acknowledge the existence of other Tales games because, oh, my precious Symphonia, like, oh, I don't want it to be replaced in my heart, or, oh, it's already perfect, why would I want to bother with anything else? People exaggerate, I know, still. So, I got so upset about this because I took people's opinions way too seriously back then. And I just kind of stopped keeping up with the series altogether for a while. So I focused on other RPGs, a bunch of other stuff like the Mana series, Final Fantasy, of course, other stuff. So, years and years later, a friend of mine would tell me about a game called Tales of the Abyss. And I was like, dude, I had a big falling out with the series. I don't really care much about these titles. And so, now, petty as it sounds, my mind kind of was changed about checking it out, though, because my friend was like, oh, but you should see this shit, though. Abyss fans and Symphonia fans are like at war over which game is superior. They're constantly arguing, and the two games are totally different. They're made by the same team, but trust me, like, they've got nothing to do with one each other, so... I was like, alright, fine. So, I go out, get me a copy of Abyss, and, despite its many flaws, which he's gone over, I liked it enough. It was okay. And, I was like, if it's an improvement at least, sure, why not? I'll keep an eye on the Tales again. A few months later, got Legendia, and to this day, I still feel it's a really underrated game, and, I liked it. I liked it a lot. So, I was like, alright, cool, I'm gonna get back in the series. They're on the right track now, they got me back. I'll just not talk to Symphonia fans, because, So, yeah. Now then. Then another stinker came along, though. That was Tales of Vesperia. Tales of Vesperia was... I think it is actually the only Tales game I've never bought, or at least its original version, because I didn't have a 360, and I didn't want to get a 360, because nothing really interested me on it, except for, like, Fable 2, but that was about it. So... I just borrowed it from I borrowed Vesperia from a friend of mine, and then whenever I was visiting my cousins, because they had, like, every video game system ever, so whenever I was visiting one of them, I would just pop Vesperia and play it, whatever. Needless to say, I hated this game too, and I especially hated the main character, Uriel. Yeah, so, once again, against my better judgment, I went online to see fan reactions, and it seems that there was a cycle to this shit, because so many people were, again, praising this as like one of the greatest RPGs ever made. Oh, the voice acting is fucking perfect. Oh, the battle system is the greatest in any game ever, shit like that. But the worst part about it, at least to me, was that everyone seemed to be in love with Yuri. And to me, he's just one of the biggest assholes in in a bunch of games I played. I couldn't stand him for like 75% of the game, and just terrible guy. I just never understood why he was the hero. And as soon as I was able to kick him out of my party, I did. And I hated whenever the game friggin' forced you to have him, but whatever. So, next up, I kind of dropped a little again, and again though, going the cycle, another friend of mine, different from before, later on, would be all like, hey, did you hear that Tales of Symphonia got a sequel for the Wii? And I was like, what? Why the fuck do I care? I fucking hate Symphonia. Why would I want to play the second one? And he was like, oh, but dude, it's a good thing you don't want to play it, because that game sucks. It's so different from, like, he didn't even hear me insulting what was probably one of his favorite games. He was just like, oh, he was just happy that I didn't want to play Symphonia 2. Oh, fuck that. And I was like, and then I was like, huh, okay, I will try. Again, I'm sorry, I know it's petty, but, so, got it, popped it in, and I was like, alright, let's tear this a new asshole, because, you know, I didn't like the first Symphonia, as I've already stated. I didn't expect shit from the second one, but I was actually surprised. Everything I hated about the first game was basically gone. Like, when people say that they're different games, you know, good. Like, that, to me, that was always a thing with, Tales, is that, you know, each one should have its own unique identity. At least in my opinion, and Symphonia 2 seemed to have done that, while simultaneously still being connected to the first one, which I thought was impressive. So, you know, I liked the characters. The combat system was a little weird, mostly the axis problem that everyone's gone on and on about. But hey, you know, it was fine for me. And I didn't even mind the characters from the first game who I hated. Like, suddenly they just stopped being annoying to me. It was pretty nice. So, now, I go online just to see if my friend was right. And instead of people arguing pros and cons like they usually would with other Tales games that weren't Symphonia or Vesperia, most of the comments I saw for Symphonia 2 or Dawn of the New World or Night of Ratatosk, whatever you want to call it, basically amounted to, oh, wah, it's not the first Symphonia. Blue, blue, blue. I wanted to play the first Symphonia again. And so, you know, rather than acknowledge it as just a different game or having its own thing, they just wanted to play Symphonia again. So in my mind, and to this day I still wonder, well, if you want more Symphonia, just replay Symphonia. Like, it's right there. You have it. What's the point of whining? I don't get it. So, yeah, then after that, of course, there was the dry spell of Tale stuff that the US had. Not including fan translations and reading mythology, which, by the way, I did enjoy. It was around this time that an online friend of mine told me about a website called Mizuho. And, you know, I looked it up, and I was like, well, it's a Symphonia fan site, and I don't really click with the Symphonia crowd. And so, now, she was like, oh, but no, it says that, but over the years it's turned into like a general fan site, and the people there are cool. I think you'd like them. I'm like, okay, so got in there and started typing up, and you know, I actually had it, to my surprise, it was one of the few Tales sites that I was like, oh, I actually like these people. I ended up meeting and connecting with a lot of people that you've heard me hanging out with before, like Flamesron, Siphon Vectorman, Lady Sheena, etc. And, you know, for the first time, me simply posting a simple sentence like, I personally don't care for Tales of Symphonia, didn't set them into a furious rage. That, like, most of the time the reaction I would get would be like, why? And then when I would say, they would just be like, whatever. Like they wouldn't even bother. So, you know, it works for me, okay? So, yeah, and then, you know, whenever I mentioned that, God forbid, I hated Kratos and Yuri, they didn't go foaming at the mouth and going, oh, you're the worst person ever, etc., you have no taste, blah. So, hooray! People had varied opinions on this website, even if most of them did start with Symphonia. No? So, this, of course, eventually led to the little podcast group that we ended up making. And anyone could tell you I'm very vocal about my opinions, whether you like them or not. And, it's been a fun ride, to say the very least. I want to take this time, even if I don't get along with, half the people at Mizuho anymore, thank you for keeping the spirit of the place alive, because without that, I wouldn't have made some pretty damn cool friends. So, even if you hate my guts or I hate yours, I can thank you for that, at least. So, that said, what about the latest games? They're okay. Exillia 2 was, the highlight for me. And even then, I don't feel for it as strongly as I've noticed a lot of other people do. Exillia 1 and Exillia 2 fans seem to be, at each other's throats, which I suppose is the nature of sequels in the Tales series. And then as for Graces, it was just okay. I saw a lot of people hating on the battle system. I personally, I kind of liked the direction it did, and I was glad that they brought back sidestepping for Exillia 2. It was nice. And as for Zestiria, I haven't watched the OVA yet, but I am looking forward to it. Although I will say that personally, I do not like most of the cameo outfits that they reveal. I'm fucking sick of them just recycling the same 4 or 5 cameo outfits over and over again. Guys, there are more swordsman characters than Yuri and Leon. There are more magic swordsman people than Zelos. You can mix it up a little bit. It's okay. You don't have to worry. So, now you might be thinking, what is it that makes Eternia so special? Oh, you fucking hate Symphonia Vesperia, well, what the fuck is this about Eternia? I bet Eternia sucks. Or at least that's how I'd probably feel if I were listening to some asshole insulting one of my favorite games. But, anyway. So, what is it? Well, probably the most important factor for me is the characters. I really liked most of the characters in both games. I liked how they developed. I liked their voices. I liked their fighting styles. I liked their designs. It just, they were a complete package to me. They were very enjoyable. I felt like I could connect with them on some level at various points. And Eternia, especially in terms of theme, I really liked Eternia's theme of trying to understand other people's pain, which I think is a moral not spread enough, especially nowadays, but that just might be me being old speaking, but yeah, whatever. And hell, I could even work on that. I'm not gonna pretend like I'm some perfect fucking guy who just empathizes with everyone's plight, okay? So, I'm not gonna try and be a hypocrite here. So, on top of that, Eternia's battle system, especially for its time, really fast-paced and hectic. The 3D spells with 2D sprites was really cool visual style. I like the explosions flying everywhere, and, you could actually combo moves in this game. Or at least more successfully than you could in Destiny. And, a surprising amount of strategy with fights like Undine and Celsius and whatnot, even if they were hard as shit because of it. I enjoyed it a lot. And, this especially came down hard on gameplay-wise for Symphonia, because, to me, Symphonia's battle system, it was like they just slowed it down, and I'm like, well, not only that, but it was fucking stupid, because, everything was 3D, and your enemies could be moving up and down in 3D and all that, but you couldn't. What kind of shit is that? I mean, yeah, you could target another enemy to move on another plane, but that's, why can't I just move up and down? It's stupid. If you're gonna make a 2D battle system, make it a 2D battle system. But whatever. I digress. So, that was a big turnoff. I guess in terms of gameplay, that would be the biggest thing. So, now, and of course I mentioned Eternia has a great soundtrack. It's probably my favorite out of the Tales games. And I really wish that other titles who reference Eternia's soundtrack would learn that there's more songs to it than Eternal Mind and Infuria Battle. But unfortunately, and apparently that's never going to happen unless it's a Radiant Mythology game. But, so. And then also I mentioned, you know, the art style. The art style has withstood the test of time, especially because it would only continue being used over and over again in other sprite titles like the Narikiri Dungeon games, and it would be later on refined in other games like Tales of Hearts and Narikiri Dungeon Cross, and, you know, all that. So, you know, it's left its impact. I also feel like Eternia is also where the Tales series kind of started to find its identity of, because Eternia started a lot of traditions that a lot of people don't give it credit for. They usually give Symphonia the credit for it. It's misplaced, at least in my experience. So, now, I imagine that a lot of you listening have probably put together already, but Tales of Eternia was also amongst the various RPGs that, you know, me and my cousins grew up with side by side. We really loved playing RPGs together because we really like to associate ourselves with characters. This would even include other games that weren't RPGs though too, because we have a lot of fond memories with other stuff like I mentioned. Mega Man X1 was a big one. The Breath of Fire series was huge. There, of course, was Final Fantasy, where we would all argue which one's the best one. You know, it's typical stuff. I mean, hell, RPGs, platformers, stuff like that. Video games are basically how I learned to read. I mean, it's because I really had the desire for the first time to really want to know what was going on. Yeah, yeah, I was never a big book guy, so that didn't fly. So yeah, RPGs and platformers, I really was interested in what these characters were going through, what was happening in the story, what was happening to the world. So whenever we would, you know, that plus all the experiences I shared with my cousins, I grew up with all these games, and they have a very special meaning to me. So whenever I play classic games like that, I can't help but think back to those days. You know, because my cousins and I, we don't see each other as much anymore because we're all old and we have all our own thing to do. But, you know, it makes me think back to when we would all just hang out a lot and just, you know, have fun. And it's a sense of fun that I feel like a lot of games and even TV shows nowadays have kind of forgotten about, but hey, whatever. So, would I still think Eternia was one of my top RPGs, even without, you know, me having that bonding experience? Well, I think so. Remember, Destiny was one of those games too. And, you know, I found a lot of RPGs I've liked better than it. Hell, Tales of Destiny, like, I don't even think is in my top 5 Tales games anymore. It might be, I'd have to make a list over again, but heck, it's definitely not in my top, like, 10 general RPGs. I've found many an RPG that I've liked better. And, you know, that goes for a lot of other games, too. So, while, yeah, it's contributed, I don't think it would be that much of a detriment if I didn't have it. So, with that said, the Tales series has, and I think always will, hold a special place to me. And, you know, I look forward to seeing what they do with it in the future, both on the gaming end, the social end, the impacts it'll have in general, and, you know, what'll they do with newer titles and the remakes that they keep doing, which, in my opinion, have been not as good as the originals for most cases, but regardless, it's something I'm always interested in looking forward to. So, you know, from me to you, if you're a Tales fan, great. Whether you got in with Symphonia or Vesperia or Abyss 3DS or what have you, enjoy your game. Don't let anyone tell you you're not allowed to enjoy a game you like, because that's horseshit. Like, I might hate Symphonia and Vesperia with a burning passion, but you know what? If it's honest to God your favorite, for whatever reason, enjoy it, okay? I'm not gonna go cramming my fist down someone's throat and say, "Oh, you stupid motherfucker, you better start liking Eternia right now." Like, okay, so... And if I ever come off that way, I apologize from the forefront right here. So, with that said, I hope that people will continue to have interest in the Tales series. I know I will. And I will continue to be making videos for it in the future. So this is Dream Sword, and I hope you all have a happy new year. Take care.